My name is Lindsay Carter, and everything I'm about to tell you is true, but I'm also about to confess something that might make you hate me. 3 years ago, I moved into a building in the Parker District with one purpose: to gather evidence that the Blackwood family was systematically defrauding elderly tenants and using shell corporations to hide millions in illegal real estate schemes. I wasn't a struggling renter. I was a forensic real estate investigator working with the district attorney's office, and my target was one of the most respected families in the city's real estate community. The plan was simple: get close, document everything, build the case, and get out. But then I made a mistake that changed everything. I fell in love with James Blackwood, the son who had no idea what his family was really doing. For 3 years, I watched his mother mock my cheap apartment, while I secretly documented how she'd stolen that building from a 92-year-old woman with dementia. I listened to his father brag about his business success while I photographed evidence of money laundering. I let his sister call me a gold digger while I built a case that could send their entire family to prison. And the worst part? The meeting they walked into wasn't about approving a lease. It was the moment I had to choose between the man I loved and the justice that dozens of displaced families deserved. What happened in that conference room didn't just expose my secret, it exposed theirs. And when James found out what I'd really been doing for 3 years, when he realized that every moment between us had been part of an investigation, the look on his face broke something in me that might never heal. Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand that there are no heroes here, just people making impossible choices. If you want a simple revenge story, this isn't it. This is about what happens when you go undercover and forget you're pretending. Hit subscribe if you want to hear the truth, even when it's complicated. Drop a comment and tell me, if you discovered someone you loved had committed crimes, what would you do? Now let me take you back to where this really started. 4 years ago, I was sitting in the district attorney's office, listening to a woman named Dorothy Williams cry. She was 78 years old, and she'd just been evicted from an apartment she'd lived in for 40 years. "I don't understand," she kept saying, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. "They said I signed papers agreeing to leave, but I never signed anything. I would never leave my home." The attorney handling her case, Michael Chen, slid a document across the table to me. "Look at the signature," he said quietly. I looked. The signature was shaky, barely legible, completely unlike Dorothy's actual signature on her driver's license. "This is forged," I said immediately. "We know," Michael replied, "and Dorothy isn't the only one. We have 14 cases in the last 2 years, all elderly tenants in rent-controlled apartments, all suddenly agreeing to leave and sell their apartments back to the building owners at a fraction of market value, all in buildings owned by the same property management company." He pulled out a file and opened it to show me a web of corporate entities, shell companies within shell companies, each one hiding the ownership trail. But at the center of it all was one name: Blackwood Properties. "These people are sophisticated," Michael continued. "They know exactly how to exploit vulnerable tenants. They use power of attorney tricks, forge documents when they need to, and they've bribed enough city inspectors that complaints disappear. We've been investigating them for 18 months, and we have nothing that would stick in court. Every time we get close, witnesses recant, or evidence disappears." "What do you need from me?" I asked. I'd been doing forensic real estate investigation for 5 years by then, specializing in uncovering fraud in property transactions. I knew how to read documents, spot forgeries, trace money through corporate structures. "We need someone on the inside," Michael said. "Someone who can document their practices in real time, get access to their files, their communications, their real financial records. We need evidence that's ironclad enough to survive their expensive lawyers." He slid a photo across the table. It showed a handsome man in his late 20s, dark hair, easy smile. "This is James Blackwood, only son. Works in the family business, but from what we can tell, he's kept at arm's length from the illegal activities. His father, Richard, runs the fraud operations. His mother, Patricia, handles the intimidation of tenants. His sister, Vanessa, manages the shell corporations. James does legitimate property management for their legal holdings." "You want me to get close to him," I said slowly. "We want you to become part of their world," Michael confirmed. "Date him if you can. Get invited to family events. Get access to their home office, their computers, their conversations. We're not asking you to sleep with him or marry him. Just get close enough to see what they're hiding." I looked at Dorothy, who was still crying quietly in the corner. I thought about the 14 other families who'd been forced from their homes. I thought about how many more there might be that we didn't even know about. "I'll do it," I said. They set me up with a complete background, new job history as a property manager for a small firm that actually existed and would confirm my employment if anyone checked. A modest apartment in one of the Blackwoods buildings, not one of the ones involved in fraud, but close enough to make the connection feel natural. A Honda Civic that was actually a surveillance vehicle with hidden cameras. Everything about my life became a constructed identity designed to make me appear exactly like the kind of person the Blackwood family would dismiss. Working class, struggling, insignificant. Someone they'd never see as a threat. The plan was to engineer a meeting with James, but fate did that for me. 3 weeks after I moved into my plant apartment, I was at a coffee shop reviewing case files on my encrypted laptop when someone's coffee spilled across my table. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," a voice said, and I looked up to see James Blackwood frantically trying to mop up coffee with napkins. I wasn't watching where I was going. "It's fine," I said, moving my laptop to safety. "No harm done." "Let me buy you another coffee at least," he insisted. "And maybe a new shirt? That definitely hit your sleeve." He was charming, genuinely apologetic. There was something warm in his eyes that made me think maybe Michael had been wrong, maybe this man knew exactly what his family was doing. But I'd been trained for this. I smiled, accepted the coffee, and let him sit down. We talked for 2 hours. He was easy to talk to, funny, self-deprecating about coming from a real estate family. "Everyone assumes I'm some trust fund kid," he said with a laugh. "And I mean, I'm not going to lie and say I grew up struggling, but my parents made me earn everything. I worked as a building superintendent for 2 years before they'd let me join the company. Changed toilets, dealt with rodent problems, the whole thing." "That must have been humbling," I said. "It was necessary," he replied. "You can't understand real estate unless you understand what tenants actually need. My parents sometimes forget that buildings aren't just investments. They're people's homes." I watched him carefully as he said this. There was genuine conviction in his voice. Either he was an incredible actor, or he really didn't know what his family was doing. "What about you?" he asked. "What brings you to the Parker District?" "Work," I said, sticking to my cover story. "I'm in property management. Just moved here for a job opportunity." "Parker District is great," he said enthusiastically. "Everyone says it's sketchy, but I think it's the most interesting neighborhood in the city. Real community, actual diversity, not like those sterile luxury buildings uptown." We exchanged numbers. He texted me that night asking if I wanted to get dinner. I said yes, and as I typed the response, I felt my first twinge of guilt. This man seemed genuinely kind, and I was about to use him as a tool to destroy his family. Over the next month, we dated. James was attentive, thoughtful, different from the cutthroat real estate stereotypes I'd expected. He talked about wanting to change how his family's business operated, about prioritizing tenant welfare over profit margins. He mentioned tensions with his parents over their old-school approach to property management. "My dad thinks every tenant is trying to scam us," James said one night over dinner. "He treats lease negotiations like warfare. I keep trying to tell him that happy tenants stay longer and take better care of properties, but he's stuck in this adversarial mindset." This was useful intelligence. It confirmed that James was kept separate from the criminal operations, but it also made my job harder, because the more time I spent with him, the more I genuinely liked him. After 6 weeks of dating, James invited me to Sunday brunch with his family. "Fair warning," he said nervously, "my mom can be a lot. She's very particular about who I date. Just be yourself and you'll be fine." I wasn't going to be myself. I was going to be the carefully constructed version of myself, designed to make the Blackwood family underestimate me completely. I wore a dress from a mid-range department store. I drove my Honda Civic with its hidden cameras recording everything. I rehearsed my backstory one more time. Property manager, modest income, no family money, renting an apartment in Parker District. Everything designed to trigger their class prejudices and make them dismiss me as beneath their notice. The Blackwood estate in Greenwich was exactly what I'd expected from the surveillance photos. Sprawling, ostentatious, the kind of wealth that announces itself loudly. Patricia Blackwood answered the door in designer clothes, head to toe, and I watched her eyes do a quick assessment of me. My dress, my shoes, my purse. I could see her cataloging each item and finding them wanting. "So you're Lindsay," she said, making my name sound like a question. "James has told us so much about you. Come in." The microphone hidden in my necklace was recording everything. The camera in my purse strap was capturing video. This wasn't just a social visit. It was an intelligence-gathering operation. Richard Blackwood was in the living room, and his handshake was designed to dominate, firm to the point of pain. He held eye contact just a little too long, establishing hierarchy. "James tells us you're in property management," he said. "Coordinating repairs, that sort of thing?" "Tenant relations, maintenance oversight, lease administration," I said, which was vague enough to be true. "That's good honest work," Patricia said in a tone that suggested honest work was for people who couldn't do better. "Not everyone can operate at the investment level like our family does." The interrogation disguised as brunch lasted 2 hours. Where did I grow up? State school. What did my parents do? Teacher and nurse. Where did I live? Parker District. Each answer seemed to confirm their prejudices about me. I was working class, unglamorous, beneath their son's station. Perfect. After brunch, as I was leaving, I overheard Patricia talking to Richard in the kitchen. My hidden microphone picked up every word. "She seems sweet, but she's not right for James. He needs someone who understands our world, someone with connections. This girl rents an apartment and drives a car from 2016. She has no assets, no family money. What happens if James gets serious about her? She'll be a drain on our resources." "James will figure it out," Richard replied. "He's going through a phase where he thinks he needs to date real people. He'll get bored of playing middle class and come back to reality." I smiled as I drove away. They'd dismissed me completely, which meant they'd never see me as a threat. Now the real work could begin. Over the next year, I became a fixture in James's life, and peripherally in his family's world. I was invited to holiday gatherings, birthday parties, charity events, always as the slightly inappropriate girlfriend who didn't quite fit. Patricia made subtle digs about my apartment, my car, my background. Vanessa, James's sister, was more openly hostile. "I don't understand what James sees in you," she said at Christmas. "You're so ordinary." "I think that's exactly what he sees," I replied with a smile. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence. Every time I was in their house, I was photographing documents left on Richard's desk. Every conversation at family events was being recorded. Every casual mention of a property transaction was noted and cross-referenced against public records. The breakthrough came 8 months into my investigation. I was at the Blackwood house for James's birthday when Patricia's phone rang. She stepped into the study to take the call, and I followed, pretending I was looking for the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, and my microphone caught everything. "Mr. Chen, we've been over this," Patricia was saying, her voice sharp. "Your mother signed the agreement voluntarily. She was of sound mind, and she agreed to vacate the property." There was a pause. "I don't care what your family thinks. The document is legally binding. If you continue to harass us, we'll pursue legal action against you." Another pause. "Your mother was 90 years old and very confused. It's not our fault she didn't understand what she was signing. The sale is final." She hung up and I quickly moved away from the door. But I'd heard enough. This was it. This was Patricia directly threatening a family member of a victim. I immediately texted Michael Chen at the DA's office. "Need to trace a call made from Patricia Blackwood's phone approximately 8:47 p.m. May have recording of her admitting to exploiting elderly tenant." That recording became the foundation of our case. But we needed more. We needed access to their financial records, their shell company documents, proof of the forged signatures, and that meant I needed to get closer. I started casually mentioning to James that I was interested in learning more about real estate investment. "Your family has been so successful," I said one night. "I'd love to understand how they built their portfolio. Maybe your dad would be willing to share some advice?" James lit up. He loved the idea of me taking an interest in his family's business. "My dad would love to mentor you. He's always looking for people who want to learn the real estate game." The following week, Richard invited me to his home office for what he called a crash course in property investment. This was exactly what I needed. His office was the hub of their operations, and I'd finally have legitimate access. I wore a blazer with a camera hidden in the button. I carried a notebook with a recording device embedded in the spine. I was going to document everything. Richard's office was impressive. Dark wood, leather chairs, walls lined with property deeds and architectural renderings. "The key to real estate wealth," Richard began, "is understanding that properties are just numbers on a spreadsheet. People get emotional about their homes, but that's their weakness. We see opportunities." He pulled out files showing various properties they'd acquired. "This building, for example, we bought it 5 years ago. It was full of rent-controlled tenants paying next to nothing. We couldn't raise rents because of city regulations, so we had to find creative solutions to encourage tenants to leave." "What kind of creative solutions?" I asked, my heart pounding. This was it. He was going to admit everything on camera. "Well, you start with legitimate tactics, small rent increases where allowed, necessary repairs that temporarily displace tenants. But some tenants are stubborn. They've lived somewhere for decades and they refuse to adapt to market realities." He smiled and it was cold. "That's when you need to be more persuasive." "Persuasive how?" I asked carefully. "Let me show you something," Richard said, pulling out a folder. Inside were documents I recognized from the investigation: forged tenant agreements, fake power of attorney forms, falsified building inspection reports. "These tenants were all over 75, Richard explained, pointing to names on a spreadsheet. "At that age, memory becomes unreliable. If you present them with documents and speak with authority, many of them will sign without fully understanding. Their families usually don't get involved until after the fact, and by then it's legally binding." "But what if they didn't actually understand what they were signing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "That's not our legal responsibility," Richard said dismissively. "We're not required to ensure mental competency. We present the documents, they sign, the transaction is complete. If their families have concerns, that's a civil matter between them. Not our problem." He was confessing everything. Every word was being recorded. Every document was being photographed. I had him. "Of course," Richard continued, "you have to be careful about documentation. That's why we use shell companies for these transactions. Blackwood Properties stays clean. The acquisitions happen through subsidiaries: Parker Street Holdings, Downtown Development LLC, Metro Property Group, all technically separate entities, all ultimately controlled by us." He pulled out a diagram showing the corporate structure, and I made sure to angle my body so the camera captured it clearly. "The beauty of this system," Richard said, "is that even if one transaction gets challenged, it doesn't touch the main company. We're insulated." "What about the city inspectors?" I asked. "Don't they flag these kinds of things?" Richard laughed. "Inspectors are city employees making $50,000 a year. A nice envelope at Christmas keeps them friendly. We've been paying off Inspector Martinez in the Parker District for 6 years. He signs off on whatever we need." This was bigger than I'd thought. This wasn't just elder abuse. This was systematic corruption involving city officials. I needed to get this information to Michael immediately, but I had to be careful not to blow my cover. "This is fascinating," I said, trying to sound impressed rather than horrified. "You've really built an efficient system." "It's taken years to perfect," Richard said proudly. "Patricia handles the tenant negotiations. She has a gift for making people feel like signing away their homes was their idea. Vanessa manages the shell corporations and keeps the paper trail clean. And James—" He paused and his expression shifted. "James doesn't know about any of this," Richard said quietly. He's a good kid, but he's soft. He thinks real estate should be about helping people, building communities. That's not how you build wealth, so we keep him focused on the legitimate properties and let him believe that's all we do." "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. Richard leaned back in his chair. "Because I think you're smarter than my family gives you credit for. Patricia sees you as some working-class girl who isn't good enough for James, but I see someone who understands how the world really works. Someone who might want to learn how to actually make money in this business instead of scraping by in property management." He was trying to recruit me. He thought I was ambitious enough to ignore ethics if it meant financial success. "I'm interested," I lied. "Good," Richard said. "Because we might have a position for you, someone who can interface with tenants in a friendly way, make them feel comfortable, get them to sign documents they might otherwise question. You have a trustworthy face. That's valuable." I left that meeting with everything I needed. Richard had confessed to fraud, elder abuse, forgery, and bribing city officials. It was all recorded, all documented. I could have wrapped up the investigation right then. But then came the complication I didn't expect. That night, James took me to dinner at our favorite restaurant. He seemed nervous, kept adjusting his collar, fidgeting with his wine glass. "Lindsay, I need to tell you something," he said finally. "I love you." My heart stopped. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to stay detached, professional, focused on the investigation. But looking at James across the table, at the genuine emotion in his eyes, I realized I'd made a catastrophic mistake. I'd fallen in love with him too. "My family doesn't understand what we have," James continued. "They think you're not good enough for me because you don't come from money. But that's exactly why I love you. You're real. You care about things that matter. You don't measure people by their bank accounts." Every word was a knife. He loved me for being genuine, and everything about me was a lie. "I want to build a life with you," James said. "I want to leave Blackwood Properties, start something of my own, something ethical and clean, away from my family's influence. I want us to do it together." "James," I started, but I didn't know what to say. How could I tell him the truth? That I wasn't who he thought I was? That I'd been investigating his family for a year? That everything he thought we'd built together was part of an undercover operation? "You don't have to answer now," James said quickly, misunderstanding my hesitation. "I know it's a lot. I just wanted you to know how I feel." I reached across the table and took his hand, and in that moment I made a decision that went against every protocol in my training. I decided not to tell him. Not yet. I would finish the investigation, build the case against his family, and then figure out how to tell James the truth in a way that might preserve what we had. It was selfish. It was unprofessional. It was the biggest mistake of my life. For the next year, I lived in two worlds. During the day, I was Lindsay the girlfriend, attending family events and enduring Patricia's condescension. At night, I was Agent Carter, passing evidence to the DA's office and building an ironclad case against the Blackwood family. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. I'd sit at holiday dinners listening to Richard and Patricia casually discuss displacing families, and I'd have to smile and nod while secretly recording everything. I'd watch Vanessa manage the shell corporations that hid their crimes, and I'd have to pretend I was impressed by her business acumen. And worst of all, I'd lie in James's arms at night knowing that everything we had was built on my deception. The case was nearly complete. We had recordings, documents, testimony from victims, evidence of bribes to city officials. Michael told me we were weeks away from filing charges. "You've done incredible work," he said during one of our secret meetings. "This case is going to expose systemic corruption in the city's real estate industry. The Blackwoods are going to prison." "What about James?" I asked. "He's not involved in any of it." "He'll be collateral damage," Michael said bluntly. "His family will be destroyed. His name will be tainted by association. You need to prepare for that, and you need to prepare to testify." "Testify?" I repeated. "You're our primary witness. You gathered the evidence. You were inside their organization. Without your testimony about what Richard showed you, what Patricia said, what Vanessa did, the defense will argue the evidence was obtained improperly. James will never forgive me, I said quietly. James's feelings aren't the priority here, Michael replied. 14 families were displaced. Dozens more were defrauded. Your job was to get justice for them, not to fall in love with the target's son. He was right. I knew he was right, but it didn't make it hurt less. The plan was to arrest the Blackwood family in 2 weeks, but then something happened that forced my hand earlier than expected. James came to my apartment on a Tuesday night, and he was devastated. My dad is moving forward with a new acquisition, he said, pacing my living room. A building in the Parker district. He says it's a great investment opportunity, but Lindsay, I looked at the tenant list. It's full of elderly people on fixed incomes. I know what he's going to do. He's going to force them out. How do you know? I asked carefully. Because I found documents in his office, James said, pulling out his phone to show me photos. Look at this. Plans to claim the building needs extensive renovations, inspections scheduled with that inspector he's friendly with, lists of tenants with notes about their ages and mental state. He's targeting them. James looked at me with anguish. I can't be part of this anymore. I can't work for a company that destroys people's lives. But Lindsay, he's my father. If I go public with this, if I expose what he's doing, I'll be destroying my own family. This was the moment. I could tell him the truth right now. I could explain that I already had all the evidence, that his family was already going to be held accountable. But if I told him now, he'd know I'd been lying for 2 years. Instead, I said, what if someone else exposed it? Someone outside the family? Who would believe them? James asked hopelessly. My family has connections, expensive lawyers. They'd bury any allegations. What if the evidence was undeniable? I pressed. He looked at me strangely. Lindsay, what are you saying? I was saying too much. I backpedaled. I just mean maybe there's a way to stop this without you having to be the one who comes forward. That night, after James left, I called Michael. We need to move now. The Blackwoods are about to displace another building full of tenants. We can't wait 2 more weeks. Are you sure? Michael asked. Is your cover still secure? It's secure, I lied, but we need to act before more people get hurt. We scheduled the operation for Friday. The plan was coordinated arrests. Richard, Patricia, and Vanessa would be taken into custody simultaneously at different locations. Federal agents would raid their offices and home to seize documents and computers, and I would be extracted before any of them knew I was involved. But I made one unauthorized decision. I decided to tell James first. On Thursday night, I asked him to meet me at my apartment. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times, but when he walked in, looking at me with trust and love, all my rehearsed speeches disappeared. James, I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate me, I started. That's not possible, he said with a smile. There's nothing you could tell me that would make me hate you. I'm not who you think I am, I said. My name is Lindsay Carter, that part is true, but I don't work in property management. I'm a forensic real estate investigator. For the past 2 years, I've been working undercover with the district attorney's office, building a case against your family for real estate fraud, elder abuse, forgery, and corruption. The color drained from James's face. What? Your family has been systematically defrauding elderly tenants, I continued, words tumbling out faster now. They forge documents, exploit people with dementia, bribe city inspectors. They've displaced at least 14 families that we know of, probably more. I was sent to investigate them. Tomorrow, they're going to be arrested. James stood up, stumbled back like I'd physically struck him. You've been lying to me for 2 years? I've been doing my job, I said, but even to my own ears it sounded weak. Your job, he repeated hollowly. Was dating me part of your job? Telling me you loved me? Sleeping with me? No, I said desperately. That was real. James, everything between us was real. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you, but I did. You're a liar, he said, and his voice was shaking. Everything about you is a lie. Your job, your apartment, probably your feelings. Was any of it true? My feelings were true, I insisted. I love you. That's why I'm telling you this now before the arrests happen. You're not implicated in any of this. You're going to be okay." "My family is going to be arrested and I'm going to be okay?" James asked incredulously. "Lindsay, they're my family. Whatever they did, they're still my family, and you used me to destroy them." "They destroyed 14 families," I shot back. "They stole homes from elderly people. They committed crimes. I'm just making sure they face consequences." "While pretending to be my girlfriend," James said. "While lying to me every single day for 2 years. Did you laugh about it? Did you and your DA friends laugh about how stupid I was? How easy it was to fool me?" "It was never like that," I said, and I was crying now. "James, please, I know you're angry, but you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted. "You're a liar who used me as a tool. The only question is whether you ever cared about me at all, or if that was just part of the job, too." He walked to the door, then stopped and turned back. "Tomorrow, when they arrest my family, I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope destroying people's lives feels as righteous as you thought it would." Then he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment surrounded by 2 years of evidence against the Blackwood family and wondered if I'd made the right choices. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. It was Michael. "It's happening. Richard Blackwood is being arrested at his office, Patricia at her country club, Vanessa at her apartment. We need you to come to the DA's office now for your statement." I drove downtown in a daze. The morning news was already covering the story. Prominent real estate family arrested in massive fraud scheme. By the time I reached the DA's office, it was a media circus. At 9 a.m., I was in a conference room giving my official statement when someone burst in. "We have a problem," an assistant district attorney said. "James Blackwood is in the lobby. He's demanding to speak to whoever was the undercover investigator." "He knows it's me," I said. "I told him last night." Michael looked furious. "You did what? You compromised the operation?" "The operation was complete," I interrupted. "I had all the evidence. I just wanted him to hear it from me first." "Well, he's here now, and he's threatening to go to the media," the assistant DA said. "He says he has information about how the evidence was obtained." My stomach dropped. "What kind of information?" "He won't say." "He'll only talk to you." They brought James to a private room. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His eyes were red, his clothes rumpled. "James," I started. "Did you plant evidence?" he asked abruptly. "What? No. Because my father is saying that documents are missing from his office. Documents that might have been in his office when you were there for that real estate lesson a year ago. He's saying you stole files and tampered with records." "I photographed documents that were already there," I said carefully. "I didn't plant anything." "But you were alone in his office," James pressed. "When he left to take a phone call, you had access to his files. His lawyers are going to argue that you planted evidence during that time." He was right. I had been alone in Richard's office for about 10 minutes while Richard had stepped out to handle a tenant complaint. I hadn't planted anything, but I couldn't prove that. And if Richard's lawyers created enough doubt about evidence tampering, it could compromise the entire case. "James, I didn't plant evidence," I repeated. "I documented what was already there. Your father is lying to protect himself." "How do I know you're not lying?" James asked. "You've been lying for 2 years. Why should I believe anything you say now?" "Because I'm telling you the truth," I said desperately. "Your father committed crimes. I have recordings of him admitting to fraud, forgery, bribery. I have documents in his own handwriting. I have victim testimony. The evidence is overwhelming." "Then you don't need me," James said. "So why am I here?" "Because your father's lawyers want you to testify that I had opportunity to plant evidence," I realized. "They're going to use you to create reasonable doubt." "I haven't decided what I'm going to do," James said. "But I need to know one thing. Did you ever actually love me, or was that just part of the cover story?" I looked at him, at the pain and betrayal in his eyes, and I knew that whatever I said next would determine not just our future, but potentially the entire case against his family. "I loved you," I said quietly. "I still love you." That's the truth, even though I know you don't believe me." "You're right," James said. "I don't believe you. Because if you loved me, you wouldn't have lied to me for 2 years. You wouldn't have used me to destroy my family, and you definitely wouldn't have slept with me while secretly gathering evidence against my father." He stood up to leave. "James, wait," I said. "Your family committed serious crimes. Whatever you think about me, you know that's true. You found the documents yourself. You saw what they were planning to do to that building full of elderly tenants. Don't let your anger at me protect people who hurt vulnerable families." He stopped at the door. "My whole life, I thought I knew who my family was. Then I found out they were criminals. But you know what's worse? Finding out that the person I loved most in the world was just as much of a liar as them. At least with my family, I know where I stand now. With you, I don't know what was real and what was the job." Then he left, and I sat alone in that conference room, wondering if justice was worth the price I'd paid for it. The trial took 8 months. Richard, Patricia, and Vanessa Blackwood were all charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and corruption. The evidence was overwhelming, despite the defense's attempts to suggest I'd tampered with documents. 14 victims testified. 3 city inspectors who'd taken bribes agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. The recordings I'd made were played in court, Richard's own voice describing how to exploit elderly tenants. But the defense had one powerful weapon: James Blackwood's testimony. He took the stand and described how I'd had unsupervised access to his father's office. He confirmed that documents could have been removed or added during that time. He created just enough doubt that what should have been an open and shut case became complicated. The prosecution called me to testify. I had to sit on that stand and describe in detail how I'd gone undercover, how I'd deliberately deceived the Blackwood family, how I'd used my relationship with James to gain access to their home and their trust. The defense attorney was brutal. "Ms. Carter, you admit you lied to the Blackwood family for 2 years?" "I was undercover. That's different from lying." "Is it? You lied about your job. You lied about your identity. You used a romantic relationship to gather evidence. Some might call that seduction and entrapment." "I didn't seduce anyone," I said firmly. "I documented crimes that were already being committed." "But you used James Blackwood's trust to gain access to his family, didn't you?" "I used the investigation to document criminal activity." "Did you sleep with James Blackwood?" the attorney asked. The judge sustained an objection, but the damage was done. The question hung in the courtroom. I saw James in the gallery, his face expressionless. The jury deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they found Richard Blackwood guilty on 12 counts, Patricia guilty on 8 counts, Vanessa guilty on 6 counts. Richard was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Patricia got 8 years. Vanessa got 5 years plus restitution to victims. It was a victory. Justice had been served. Families got their homes back or received compensation. Corrupt city inspectors were fired. Reforms were implemented to protect elderly tenants, but it didn't feel like victory. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse and watched James walk past me without a word. He'd lost his entire family to prison. His family's company had been dissolved, assets seized to pay restitution. His name was now associated with one of the biggest real estate fraud cases in the city's history, and the woman he'd loved had been the one to make it all happen. I quit my job with the DA's office. I couldn't do undercover work anymore. The cost was too high. I started working as a forensic accountant instead, documenting fraud on paper where I didn't have to lie to anyone. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter. It was from James. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won out. The letter was brief. "Lindsay, I've spent 6 months trying to understand what happened. I'm in therapy, trying to process having a family who were criminals and a girlfriend who was a liar. My therapist keeps asking me if I think you made the right choice by investigating my family. I don't know the answer, but I know this. You were right about them. They hurt people. They deserve to face consequences. What I can't reconcile is how you hurt me in the process. You could have told me what you were doing. You could have trusted me. Instead, you kept lying even after you said you loved me. That's the part I can't forgive. not the investigation, the fact that you chose the job over trusting me with the truth. I'm not writing this to tell you I forgive you. I'm writing because I want you to know that I understand why you did it, and I hope you understand why I can't have you in my life. The victims got justice because of you. My family is paying for their crimes because of you. But I paid too, and I didn't commit any crimes. That's the cost no one talks about when they celebrate successful investigations. Somewhere in all of this, there might have been a version of events where you told me the truth and we worked together to stop my family. But you didn't trust me enough to find out. So instead, I lost everything and you got your conviction. I hope it was worth it. I really do. Because it cost us everything we could have been. James. I read that letter probably 50 times. Each time hoping the words would change, that somehow it would have a different ending. But they never did. Because James was right. I'd made choices that prioritized the investigation over everything else. I'd chosen the case over trust. And yes, justice was served. Victims were compensated. Crimes were punished. But James, who'd done nothing wrong except love the wrong person, lost his family, his business, his home, and his relationship. He paid the price for his family's crimes and for my deception. People ask me if I'd do it differently if I could go back. The honest answer is, I don't know. If I'd told James the truth earlier, would he have helped me? Or would he have warned his family and destroyed the investigation? If I'd refused the undercover assignment, would Richard and Patricia still be out there defrauding elderly tenants? Would more families have been displaced? There are no clean answers in undercover work. Just choices and consequences. I helped put 3 criminals in prison. I helped 14 families get justice. I exposed corruption in the city government. Those are victories worth celebrating. But I also destroyed the man I loved. I used his trust as a weapon. I turned his own testimony against his family. I forced him to choose between protecting criminals and protecting the truth. And in the end, he lost everything regardless of what he chose. That's what they don't tell you about justice. Sometimes it burns everything down, guilty and innocent alike. Sometimes the cost of doing the right thing is losing the person you love. Sometimes you win the case and lose yourself in the process. If you're watching this hoping for a happy ending, I'm sorry to disappoint you. James and I never got back together. He moved to a different city, changed careers, started over somewhere his name wasn't associated with scandal. I heard through mutual friends that he's doing okay, but we've never spoken again after that letter. The Blackwood family served their sentences. Richard got out after 9 years for good behavior, Patricia after 6, Vanessa after 3.5. They're all on probation now, barred from working in real estate, required to continue making restitution payments. The buildings they stole were returned to their rightful owners or sold with proceeds going to victims. I sometimes drive past the Morrison building, the one that started this whole thing. There's a plaque now installed by the Tenant Association that reads, "In memory of Dorothy Williams and all those displaced by greed." May we never forget that homes are more than investments. I think about Dorothy sometimes, the 78-year-old woman whose tears in the DA's office started this investigation. She got her apartment back and lived there for 2 more years before passing away peacefully. Her family thanked me at her funeral. They said I gave her justice in her final years. That should feel good. It does feel good, but it also feels hollow. Because justice came at a cost no one planned for. So here's what I want you to take from this story. It's not that undercover investigations are wrong, they're necessary. Bad people need to be stopped, and sometimes deception is the only tool that works. But understand that deception has a cost, and sometimes the people who pay that cost aren't the criminals. They're the innocent people caught in the blast radius. James's family were criminals who deserved punishment, but James himself was innocent, and he lost everything anyway. That's the reality of justice work that no one talks about, the collateral damage, the innocent people who get hurt when you take down the guilty ones. If you're someone considering a career in investigation or law enforcement, know this: you will have to make impossible choices. You will have to lie to people you care about. You will have to live with the consequences of those lies even after the case is closed. And you'll have to decide if the justice you achieve is worth the relationships you destroy in the process. For me, the answer is complicated. Yes, I'd do it again. I'd take down the Blackwood family again because what they did was wrong and people were being hurt. But I'd also carry the weight of knowing that my choices hurt James, that he paid a price for his family's crimes because I used him as a tool to stop them. That's something I'll live with for the rest of my life. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between doing what's right and protecting someone you love? How did you decide? Drop a comment below, and if you believe that justice matters even when it's complicated, even when there are no easy answers, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that real life doesn't have clean endings, that sometimes doing the right thing means living with the consequences forever. Remember, justice isn't always clean. Truth isn't always comfortable, and sometimes the cost of being right is losing everything you wanted. This is Lindsay Carter, reminding you that heroes and villains aren't always clear-cut. Sometimes we're all just people making choices and living with what comes after. Until next time, choose carefully, because the choices you make don't just affect you. They affect everyone around you, guilty and innocent alike, and you'll have to live with that long after the case files are closed.